G'day. Today we're doing a bit of work on a VF Commodore Ute 3.6 litre, and it's got the dreaded leak at the transmission bell housing. So these have got the 6L45E transmission in it, similar to the 6L50s in the Colorados. And I've just had it out, I had it for a pressure wash underneath. There was just oil everywhere. You can see the oil's burnt on the exhaust, and it was just covered in everything under here. But there's oil coming out of here. So we've got the transmission out, got the torque converter out, and on these seals, have a look, there's a little circlip. So you pop that circlip off with the screwdriver, and then we've got our slide hammer. You just pop it in there. It comes out easy. Now the seal is actually nice and pliable. There's a little spring under there. Sometimes the spring can pop out, but the spring's still there. You can see that. Now it's important to just see if the bush is spun. It doesn't look like it has. The seal looks okay. Good idea to nip these up a little bit. Sometimes they do loosen, but the issue with this one is probably on the torque converter. So if you need to replace that bushing, what you need to do is you've got to pull the filter neck out of the pump and take that whole bell housing off. Make sure it's all nice and clean before you do that, and the pump has to come apart so you can get to that half of the pump to replace that bushing. And you can see the bushing hasn't spun in there. And another thing to check is the neck on the torque converter. Usually if it's worn there, it means that it may have spun or gripped on here, spun in the pump housing. So what happens on these, if you have a look, it's because they're so close, what they do is they machine the weld. Quite often they get a little hairline crack there over time, and they leak there. What we'll do, we'll put this one in the lathe and just pressure test it, just to confirm that it is leaking on that weld. Now we've made this up. That one goes inside the converter neck, not on the outside. Got a little O-ring there. Don't have to tighten it up too bad. To about 80 psi. just over 80 psi there, and we can already see that it's leaking. See that in there? So we found where it's leaking. It's not leaking on the seal. You can see they've machined the weld halfway down, and usually what happens over a period of time is that weld starts to leak. You get a hairline crack, starts to leak. Okay, we've got our adapter there. We've got important to not press on that part there. You've got to be pressing over here where it's actually sliding in. And just evenly tap it in. Now it's got to go in past that groove so we can put that circlip in. So you've got to make sure it goes in deep enough. Circlip. There we go. Always a good idea to just try and turn that circlip. That way you know it's fallen completely in the groove. Another thing we'll do, we'll just change this torque converter clutch O-ring. Has flattened out a little bit. You can see the original old black one, the Viton one, has flattened out a fair bit, so this will be an improvement to applying the torque converter clutch. There we go. Now if you have a look in there, you'll see the pump drive lugs, and I've put them at 12 and 6 o'clock, straight up and down. It'll make aligning the torque converter a lot easier when we're putting it in. A little bit of oil on that O-ring will make it slide in a bit better too, and a little bit of oil in the torque converter. Now I've got the brand new torque converter. I've got the lugs lined up straight up and down. Got a little bit of oil in there. Now we just Now, a common issue with these, or any transmission when they're fitting it, is that people think they've pushed it in deep enough, but they haven't. You've got two sets of splines that you've got to line up, as well as a pump drive. You've got stator splines, you've got your input splines, and the lugs that drive the gear. Sometimes if you don't push it in enough, you bolt the bell housing up and it hasn't gone in properly, you'll end up cracking the bell housing. These are pretty strong, so what will generally happen on these, you won't crack the bell housing, but you'll seize everything up. When you start the car, it'll just slam it in and wreck something in your pump. So I'll just show you how to measure it. Now if we get there and measure, put a straight edge across here, and that's the surface that's up against the motor, and we just measure what we've got here. You can't see the, it's about 14 mil. The torque converter bolts up onto here, so you can see there's a step there, so we have to roughly measure what the step is. Step's about 4 mil, and then so we need to subtract 4 mil because it's sitting up here when we measure it to the motor, and that's 15 mil. So 15 mil minus 4 mil, you got 11 mil from there to there. And if you remember, so 11 mil up on the motor, and here we've got, what's that, about 13 mil, 14 mil. So you can see there's not much movement there to allow for the flexing of the drive plate or the flex plate. And that's why they actually have to machine that weld on the converter neck. As you can see, there's bugger all movement there, or allowance. But anyway, this one has gone in deeper, so we know that this one's in deep enough. And another thing, we always measure at the top side of the torque converter, because when you put it in, there's nothing supporting this side, so it's actually hanging down like this. So if you've got enough play, or it's gone in a little bit deeper than what you've measured up on the block, you know that it's going to be even better when you level that up, if that makes sense. Alright, now we're going to put a bit of grease here where the dowel pins go. One here, this dowel pin came out with the transmission, the other one's up there. A little bit of grease in here as well. While you've got it all out, good idea to replace the rear main seal if it's leaking. Any Welsh plugs or anything at the back of the motor, it's a lot easier to access it while the transmission's out. Just a little bit. And on the spigot. You can come in. Okay, we've got the bell housing bolts in, and before you put them all in, it's a good idea to just make sure that the torque converter's loose. If it's not loose, it means something's come out or amiss there. There we go, all back together. Got the cover back on, had it for a test run. Just make sure you get the oil level correct. Should be just trickling out of here. And if you get your scan tool between 30 and 50 degrees, should be just trickling out of there in park. Anyway, I hope that helps. Don't forget to like and subscribe, leave any questions or comments in the section below, and don't forget to throw us a beer if any of this information helps, saves you a few dollars. Thank you for watching.